everyone. Today we are going to learn how to animate in Blender. We're going to use the Avastar add-on, and we're going to use this Avastar figure, which is basically the Second Life figure. Now I'm going to be using a newer version of Blender with tabs now. So we're going to figure this would be a good opportunity to show tabs also. There's lots of different ways to animate using Blender. Lots of different, you can use IK, you can use FK, you can use motion capture, you can import motion capture, you can use old BVH files, you can save them into pose libraries, you can bring those pose libraries into other blend files that you have, but I'm going to try and go through all of this today, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start a new scene here. Let's hit X and get rid of the cube. I want to hit N, start my screencasting here, and move this over so you guys can look at the bottom and see what keys I'm hitting. And we'll go to the bottom here. We'll hit Avastar. We'll choose Avastar there. That loads up. We're going to hit period to zoom in, to focus in on what we've selected. And now I want to go to pose mode. And as you can see, there's all these rings around the body here. And each one of those rings represents a joint or a bone. So you can take any one of these joints and just select it and hit R and move it. And then hit left click to select it. And then you can hit R again, select it, move it, R, and then hit right click to not move it. So let's say you just want to move the joint around, but you don't want to actually move it into any place. You just want to see how it moves. Then you just right click and it goes right back in place. And if you hit N on your keyboard, you'll get this side panel. And at the top, you'll see the rotations, the actual rotations. So you could actually just move these dials and they'll go in little increments. So you could pose your whole character just like that, just by moving these. You probably want to use Z here. But it also allows you to check where your, how much rotation you have on each axis. You can also rotate the bones, much like in other programs, by using these little globes, these colored wheels. But in global, it doesn't really help you all that much. It's kind of hard to deal with in global. So what you can do is switch to local. So you're using like a local rotation, so that this is always going to bring your arm in. This is always going to move your arm in and out. It's always in relation to another bone. But that's how you would use those. But I mostly like to use the keyboard keys and just rotate it like that. Let's get rid of the circle. So yeah, you can just select each bone, move it around. I can hit R, X, and it'll only move on that X. I could hit R, Z, and just turn it. So it just makes it pretty handy. And you can also just grab a hand and move it. So there's kind of an IK in there, but it doesn't work as well with the feet, as you can see there. Just doesn't work that well like that. So, but you can grab the leg, hit R, the other leg R. So you can do this pretty quickly, and you kind of use the angle of your view to decide how much play you have. And if you see these reference line, this line that goes every time you select a joint, this tells you how far that joint can move, because there are limits put on those joints. Now if you want to get rid of those limits, you would go to the right hand side here, scroll near the bottom, and you'll see rotation controls. You'll hit this button, you'll hit disable all limbs. So now you can rotate this in any way you want, as far as you want also. Now, of course, I can hit Alt R, set that bone back to 0, Alt R, just like that. But you'll also notice that in this mode, when I select, this is his center of gravity, and if I move it down, you'll see his legs stay stiff like that. Now, if you use IK, it won't be stiff. Now, there's different reasons why you might want to use IK if your character is moving side to side or moving up and down. This would be a good reason to use IK when you're animating. And I'll give you a quick view of that. We'll just select all, hit Alt R, or you can go to Pose, Clear All. So we have all the joints selected, and if we go to the side, you will see Show All Controls here. So I want to show all controls, and then I want to show the controls for his legs and his arms. And if you see, there's these little controls here. There's one on his foot. Now, to use these IK controls, now we also have to give it some influence. So here we have how much influence each IK controller has. Now, you know, I won't get into why you would want less controllers, less influence or whatever, but I'll just show you how this works. Once you set these controllers all the way, so now we have right and left leg and right and left arm. When I move this, if I select this foot and move it, now his whole leg moves somewhat in a natural way. And if I grab this, that center of gravity, now his arms stay somewhat where they need to be, his feet stay, and I can move him around in space like this real easily. Now if you grab the hand controller, you can move that around. Now I'm not too fond of the hand IKs just because you would have to move it and then kind of rotate that, and it just gets all kind of funky. So what I like to do is I like to turn the arms off. Okay, and just for the hell of it, let's undo this. And I like to just use the legs. Now, the legs it just works, you know, it's easy to use and makes things a lot easier, especially when you're talking about moving his body up and down. If you want really fluid motion, you know, maybe your guy steps to the side and then you move his foot over. You know, it's these kinds of things that you can do with IK. So I like to just use the feet IK, and then the arms I will just grab them because they kind of have a normal IK system that works anyways. So just like that. The thing you have to look out for is the shoulder when you do that. So if I just select this hand and I pull this shoulder down, his shoulder just collapses like that. Or if I move it up too far. So you have to watch your shoulder when you're using that. And the controller in front, that works the angle of your knee in the IK. So let's say I were to select this and I want to go RZ and I want to turn that foot out, then I might want to adjust the knee to either match that angle or, you know, adjust that angle of the knee. So that's what those are for. And always try and make sure they stay out away from the body, because the closer you get it in, the more you're going to have flipping and all kinds of weird stuff going on. Now, if we look over on the left, we see the pose tools under the tools tab. And the only ones we're really going to use are copy and paste. You could use copy and paste. We could add stuff to the library, or we could insert keyframes or remove keyframes, which are probably the two handiest ones in the toolbar. You can also do some of that in the properties window too. And the Avastar tab, it's just good to know that if you're switching between different functions like skinning or weighting and animating and retargeting, just make sure you're on the proper function for the bones, the proper set of bones. So now we'll just we'll start a quick animation here and show you how it sets up in the timeline. So I'm using IK, and I'll just move the foot a little. I'll hit R and Z and rotate that. And then I'll choose the other foot and go R and Z and rotate that out slightly and move that slightly over. And because I'm using IK, I'm going to shift the weight here and move it down slightly. Then I'll move this foot forward a little bit and move the whole avatar forward. And I'll bring one hand down, the other one, and we basically have a pose. RZ on the waist, RZ on the waist, or on the chest, and maybe I'll just rotate that just slightly, or maybe bring this hand up a bit. Maybe even put it on the hip here. Zoom in a little bit, rotate this. Oh, that's good enough. Rotate that up. There we go. And move this hand back just a little bit. So there we have our first pose. Okay, now we want to select all of the bones and then hit I and lock rot. Now lock rot is location rotation. That's short for location rotation. So you could hit I, rotation, I, location, and it would do the same thing. So we have that first frame keyframed, and you'll see that this little slot looks yellow, that spot for the first frame. So now if we move the timeline all the way down, we're going to make this a loop. So we'll make the last frame the same keyframe as this. So we'll go I, lock rot. And while we're doing this, we want to turn on auto keyframing. Now I have it on already, but you probably do not have it on. And you have to go into preferences to get it on. So to get preferences, you go to File, User Preferences. And now you want to go to Editing, I think. Yes. And you want to click here. Now it's kind of hard to tell with this setup if it's on. I think mine is on right now. And I have visual keying and show auto key warning. And I check allow negative frames. And then you want to hit save user settings. Okay, now, so we can auto keyframe now. So we've created a keyframe at the front and the back. And now we're going to make a keyframe kind of in the middle. Go frame 9. And we'll just move the hips. So move the hips to this side. And then maybe we will rotate the hips. Maybe R, Z. Rotate the hips a little bit. And maybe take this knee and bend it inward slightly and rotate this foot. Z, just a little bit. And then take the waist, rotate it, maybe have her lean a little bit. Maybe lean the other way, and RZ, rotate. We'll take her head, RZ, and we'll bend her neck back. Okay, to the side a little. Then we'll move the arm a little bit. And rotate the hand out. Rotate it back a little. There we go. Okay, so there's our second frame, and that should have keyframed the whole thing. So let's move them. Yep, everything keyframed properly. So just like that, we're moving side to side. And then maybe right here, I don't have a whole lot of movement, maybe here, I'm going to select everything. I'm going to copy this frame. Now I'm going to move it a little bit, a couple frames over, and paste it. Now I might want to hit I and lock right, and that just gives me a little bit of variation in the movement. Now we have a basic standing animation with the character swaying side to side. Now I think I changed my frames per second. Yes, I did. On the right hand side, if you go to the camera symbol at the top, at the bottom you'll see animation export, and you'll get frames per second here where you can change. Now this looks pretty decent speed, maybe lower it one more, 7 frames per second. And then I can hit the play button down here and watch the animation. Now that's pretty quick actually. We could probably go down to 4 frames per second. But that's the basic animation, and now I have some export options. Let's say I just want to do it in a BVH. We have our frames per second. Start frame is 1, that's right, and end frame is 20. I typed in name, so you can type in a name, and this says prepend reference. So I did not put first frame in here, a T frame. So this is going to add in a T frame for me, and now I can export it. So I can export this into any folder, and now I have an animation I can import into Second Life. That is basically how you make an animation, but of course Blender has many more tools and features that you can use to fine-tune things. So let's go to the animation layout. Oops. And on the left-hand side at the top is the dope sheet. So the dope sheet holds all the keyframes. And if you look on the side, it has each bone, even the IK bones, and then each one of the keyframes that were applied to the animation. And you could select whole frames just by selecting the top one. You could copy or duplicate that keyframe. You could copy the keyframe and paste it, and it'll paste wherever your timeline is. Now I could grab this whole keyframe right here by hitting G and moving that around, or I could hit X and delete all those keyframes. So I can select any one of these keyframes on any one of these parts. It even shows all the other keyframes, so you could just take out the X rotation if you wanted to. You could just delete that. You could also, if you put your timeline on the first frame, and inside the dope sheet window I hit and select all, hit A twice and select all. I can also make the animation faster or slower by scaling all the frames. So if I hit S, I can scale the animation just like that and make it faster or slower simply by scaling it. And it will always scale from where your timeline is, or whatever frame that you're on. So that can be a nifty trick to retiming your animation to make it faster or slower. But there's all kinds of different ways to use the dope sheet. It's a handy tool to see all the keyframes on every bone. Underneath the dope sheet we have the graph. So let's scale that up. We can take a look at the graph. And sometimes you might have handles on, so it shows you all these handles that you don't really need to see. So look at all these different handles and stuff. You don't really need to see those. You can use them, but I usually turn them off. And if you look real close, each one of the dots is a keyframe for whatever that part is, whether it's the Z rotation on the elbow or not, or the X or whatever. And if we take a look at the arm here in the window, if I select one of these keyframes, you can see me moving his arm up and down. Now I can put it right on the keyframe and you can see it moving up and down. So I could manipulate the whole animation just by going into the graph and adjusting these angles and slopes that I'm making with keyframes. But that's the basics on how the graph works. And now, if you've made it this far, I'm going to show you something I just kind of figured out, and that's how to save an animation. So let's say you spent all this time making this animation, and now you want to save it. So you would go to your action editor, okay, and you would add a new action. You would rename this animation. So let's call this stand sway, and then I would hit F to save it in this BVH. So I'm basically saving it so that I can use it somewhere else. And if you look at this list, we have 2 sets of animations here. Now if we go back to the action editor, that will always have the last set of animations that you worked on. Okay, and as long as you've already saved your animation here with this F, then you can do whatever you want in this window. I'm going to select all and then just delete everything. And now if I wanted to, I could go back to that stand animation, and there it is again. So that's how you basically save things. And if we go, we can do it in this window, but just to clean things up a little bit in our windows, we can also save animations, save keyframes in, or save poses in the pose library. So if we look in the pose library, it also has that animation we made. We can't really choose it. If we choose it like this, we don't have any frames to select and put in the animation, but you would go to your action editor and then apply the animation that way. But for poses, this is what the pose library is for. So if we go back, we can actually make our own pose library. Let's call it toot pose lib. And then we could select all the bones and then add a new pose. We can select it and rename it. We'll call this stand 1. And then we could move something, select the whole avatar again, and select that pose. So now we could move something, maybe his hand out. Maybe move this hand out. And let's select all, add a new one, call this stand arms, whatever. Now we could go to this one, select that, change it, go to that one, change it. You could create keyframes doing that, paste in the arms. Of course, you have to create your keyframe, so after you would hit this, you would hit I, lock rot, and just like that, the arms come off. You can also import pose libraries from another blend file or from someone else that gives you a blend file. And I have created a set of pose libraries for everyone to use, for anybody to use. If you go to Share CG, you search for MedHue. This is the name of the product. I'll give you a link in the description of this video. And you can download this file and bring it into your blend file and use it on your character. So if I'm in my blend file, or in my new project here, so I want to go to File, Append, and I had to download it onto this computer, so it's going to be in my Downloads folder. So it's in Downloads. Here we go, MedHue Animations Pose Lib, Blend. I go to the Action folder, and we have a set of different actions. Some of them are animations, some of them are pose libraries. So I have one for weighted poses to check your weights. I have one for MedHue poses. Let's link this one. And now if we go into our pose library, we'll see MedHue poses. So if we click on MedHue poses, we can pull this window down to see all the animations, and we can choose any one of these animations and apply them to our scene. Now these animations don't have IK. So if you're going to use any of these, you probably want to take off all of this IK data. So just like that, we're not using IK and all these poses will work. So if you want to use these poses, then you can't use the IK. So these are a free set of poses. You can do whatever you want with them. There, like I said, there are some weight to check weights with, some weight animations, or at least that's what I use them for. So I'll give you a quick look at those. So I can go to Menu Weight Poses, and I just kind of use these poses to do all my weights. You see the feet are kind of turned in, and I can check my elbows, check my, all the clothing, all the weights on clothing. But anyways, those are the files. That's how you make animation in Blender using Avastar. And have a good one, everyone.